Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services, another edition of our Talking Business series, talking with experts in the areas of banking, insurance, customer service, digital marketing, and sales, and business education. And today we have a chance to talk with a friend from Los Angeles, and that is Lenora May, who is Vice President of Business Development at Sandler Training in their Culver City office. And Lenora, great to have a chance to talk with you today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Now, first, tell us about, you got an interesting background in acting, and you've been doing that a long time. And tell us a little bit about some of your career in acting and how it led to this business opportunity for you.
Okay, so I have been a professional actor for over 30 years, started in New York, and you know, you can look me up. I'm on IMDb Pro, lots of credits, and I was married to a writer, and we had a lovely life living in the arts and supporting each other. You know, in the arts, you don't work consistently, so he'd be writing, I'd be taking care of the kids. I'd be acting, he'd be taking care of the kids. Unfortunately, 25 years later, we split up, and it was time for me to probably have to supplement what I'd been doing because I'm also older and there were less roles. I used to work a lot more than I do now. So just by coincidence, an owner of a Sandler franchise in the Valley, and his daughter and my daughter played soccer. We were both divorced. He said, "You should come see what I do." I went, and I didn't even know what it was, but once I found out it was about sales, I was a little leery. But then he gave me the book. He gave me David Sandler's book, You Can't Learn to Ride a Bike in a Day. And it was all about behavioral therapy, and I'm a total psychology geek. I love it. And it was all about dealing with people in the best possible way. So I was hooked. And I started learning the process, and fast forward, I'm now on my third franchise, working with another one, and enjoying it very much.
Well, that's terrific that you were able to make that transition. And I always say acting's terrific training. Be able to speak on a stage in front of an audience is great sales training and leadership training, really, I think, as well. Now, you've described that David Sandler came up with a very particular process for sales, and starting in the 1960s. Tell us a little bit about the process that David Sandler came up with that is used in the company today.
Right. So David Sandler was a very successful salesperson with his family's company. Then he started his own, but he was becoming very frustrated with the sales process. He would work so hard, and he'd find a lot of people saying, "Oh, yes, I'm interested. I'll think it over." And he'd be chasing people, or people would pretty much lie. "Oh, yes, we like this, we like that." No interest whatsoever. Or he found himself doing a lot of free consulting, giving out a lot of presentations, nothing coming back. So he consulted with a behavioral therapist about human behavior. And he really wanted to learn what's inside the mind of a prospect, as we are all prospects. When we go shopping, we walk into a store. I may be looking for a red dress. I'll walk into a store, somebody will say, "Can I help you?" And I'll say, "No, I'm just looking." I lied. Why did I lie? I don't want someone asking me questions. I don't want someone selling me. I don't want someone following me around. So we all do this for various reasons. So he and the therapist worked out a whole system on behaviors, human behavior, and he came up with this process for Sandler.
Well, that's terrific to hear. You know, you touch on retail, and there's a lot of theories on how to help customers. Now, you said there's a guiding principle to Sandler Training. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yes, so the idea is that when you sell about what you know, because most of us have an impulse to do that. From the time we're little, we're asked a question in school, and we all raise our hand, and we want to be the one who knows the answer. Well, this is the opposite of that. We train people to resist that urge and instead start selling and spilling, what we call spilling your candy in the lobby. Once you've done that, you have no more leverage, and people can go look you up and compare you to Google, and you've given them all your information and they can do whatever they want. So we think that it's important to understand why people do things. We tell people, instead of selling, we want you to learn how to ask questions. Now, this seems so simple, although a lot of people are now doing this, and it's wonderful. But the idea is not just questions, questions that are very strategically placed to guide you into who that person is. Do they have any real need for what you do, your service or product? Because if they don't, that's how you eliminate that person as a prospect. That's how you decide whether or not they're going to work for you. So those questions bring you very deep. You find 3, what David came up with was pain points. Today, that term is used everywhere. David Sandler is the one who started that. You come up with at least 3 very deep reasons why they might need your services through questioning. The questions are based on what you're hearing. So it's based on 30% you talk, 70% they talk.
That's an interesting way to kind of break down the conversation. And the key questions is so important, and knowing what to ask. Now, is there a difference whether you're going business to consumer or you're going in a business to business situation?
There's no difference whatsoever. You can even use this when you're dating. I mean, it's the principle is the same for all human being behavior. So if you know that people, and they generally do like to talk about themselves, even in the basics of, if you want to make friends, what do they tell you to do? Ask a question. Let somebody tell you about themselves, and they're going to be interested in you suddenly because you're asking. So this is the psychology. And but the questions we teach people to ask are very pointed. Eventually, they start out general. It's what we call the pain funnel. They start out very general. So what's going on? Tell me more about that. We go down that pipe till we get to, how is this affecting you? What is it costing you? How long has it been this way? Let's do the math. It's costing you so much a month to keep it this way. So let's look over the year. This is how much it's cost. Well, now you have very deep concern and attention. But the thing is, they're going to be telling you about this. You're not going to be telling them. You're just going to lead them to those conclusions.
Well, such an important approach. Now, one of the elements of your practice and from David Sandler is that of an upfront contract.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that and why it's effective, if you would.
Right. The upfront contract is a way to qualify, and you mentioned it earlier about qualifying your prospect. It's very important to save you time, so you're not chasing the wrong person. You're not wasting time, and you're certainly not doing free consulting. And so what we'd like you to do with every time, every conversation, every touch, and there might be several touches along the way based on your cycle, we use what's called an upfront contract, which means there are certain elements that you have to start with at the beginning of that conversation and perhaps end with. And it varies depending on what sort of conversation it is. If it's just a cold call, it can be as simple, you always get permission from the second they say hello. Hello, I'm so-and-so. I'm with such and such. Am I catching you at a bad time? Is this a bad moment? I can tell you that I call CEOs cold. And when I say that, it stops the rhythm. We break the rhythm. And they've never heard that one. Usually people just launch into their pitch, and you just can't wait to get them off the phone. So right away, there's somebody normal on the phone, you know, and I say, is this a bad time? And very often they'll say, well, I'm about to head into a meeting. What can I do for you? And then I do my 20-second pitch, and that's another conversation. But I say, I don't suppose you have those issues. Now, the person who was about to walk into the room will stop and say, well, yeah, I kind of relate to number 2. Oh, really? Tell me more about that. And now we're into a conversation. So the upfront contract is permission to ask questions, permission given for them to ask questions, Permission, this is the most important part, to say no. Always to be able to say no. Is it okay if after we chat, doesn't seem like a fit for you, will you be okay saying no? Most people hear this and go, wait a minute, I don't want to hear that. Yes, you do. Because it does a few things. It makes that person relax and they trust you. People buy from people they like and trust, and they buy emotionally. If you come on as a con man or a con woman, they're not going to trust you. When you tell someone, please, I would rather you tell me no if it's really not a fit, that means you value their time and your time. You don't want to waste anyone's time. Conversely, if you see a fit, is it okay for us to say either yes or let's make a plan for whatever those next steps will be? And the upfront contract includes specifically when is the next time we meet, how long will it be for, and we go through the whole upfront contract. What's the agenda? And what would you like to ask us by the end of this conversation? What would you like to know? So what we're doing is, by doing the upfront contract, we are taking control of the dance, as we call it, the buyer-seller dance. They're not leading the dance, we are. And it becomes a mutual collaboration.
Well, you mentioned the idea of an elevator talk or an elevator pitch, 20 seconds when you have a chance to speak to someone who might be a prospect. Tell us a little bit about what you're thinking that goes into an effective elevator pitch.
Thank you for that question. It's so important. You might meet someone in a networking group. Right now we're doing virtual. You really have, you have your time and then they move on. An elevator pitch is not about you describing all the wonderful things you do. It's the same problem when you do that. Nobody really wants to hear that, and people are not listening at that point. They're really not. What you need to do is hit 3 pain points. And you have to know what service and why people come to you for that product or service. Let's take Sandler. People come to us because they are frustrated that they're not getting in front of enough qualified prospects. They're having trouble differentiating their company from competitors, or they're just sick and tired of not closing enough new business. And then I would say, I don't suppose you have any of those issues. So I've given 3 pain points. I've said, I don't suppose. That's what we call a reverse. It's a negative reverse. They're going to correct me. They're going to say, well, actually, yeah, I do. Oh, that's a question. Oh, yeah, I can relate to not closing enough. Oh, tell me a little bit about that. Now we're into a conversation. So I gave 3 pain points. That was it. We don't need to talk about all our wonderful services and products. We're going to get into that eventually. And if they don't have those pain points, then we don't talk. Not qualified. We're not going to be able to do anything for them. So why would we want to take their time or have them take ours?
Absolutely. And you know, at CBSI, so many of our clients are banks that are working with customers trying to increase sales of consumer accounts, possibly credit cards, checking accounts, or in some cases they're doing mortgage sales or other types of loans. Is there anything that you find in a kind of commercial area like that that helps people? We call them platform people in banking, salespeople who work in branches and are out trying to serve customers and also increase sales. Is there any kind of key advice you might have for them?
Well, it's the same overall process that works, and it's trackable. If you do the same behaviors, it's a 7-step process that starts with bonding, rapport, and leads all the way to the fulfillment process, is what you would call the close. We never call it the close. The minute you try to close, you lose. So we don't do that. But if they follow those same principles in banking, we work with bankers. They're typically like to tell you all their services and how they do things. And I don't know, for me, I hear that and I kind of just glaze over. It all starts to sound the same, and I can look that up on a computer. So I want personal. I want someone who connects to me. And the best way they can do that is to understand who I am and what I need and why am I there. What's my problem? Find that pain. Find the solvable pain. If you dig down with questioning to find the pain and you find it, that person will be more likely to go to you than the other 3 bankers.
Sounds like the great advice I heard once, that the most important thing is that your customer knows that you care about them, both
And
personally.
that's our number one. That is we write that on the board every time. Well, when we were face-to-face classes, now we're virtual, but care, you have to care. And that's really what you're kind of putting on your doctor's hat and saying, you walk into a doctor's office and the first thing they do is, what do? They ask you questions. If your doctor said, well, I'm having a special today and I can do your knee and your shoulder for half the price, you'd run out the door. But instead, that doctor wants to know, let me find out about this. Let me hear about that. How long's that been going on? They care, and that's what you feel. And that's exactly what the sales process should be. And they don't teach that in schools. Although now Harvard Business School is adapting Sandler into its program. But up till now, weirdly enough, most business programs don't teach sales. And I don't care what you do for a living, you're selling. Some people say, well, I'm a marketer. Well, yeah, that's the fun part. That's the part you enjoy. The other part is the sales part, where you have to find those customers so you can do the marketing. We all have to do some form of sales. And it can be more enjoyable.
Absolutely. We were talking to an engineering school professor, and he said the most important thing for the students is to be able to speak on their feet about what their projects are, and to be able to speak to those who are paying for them, or to encourage them to on why the project's a good investment. So you have to be able to explain the value. You kind of touched on something I hear a lot about, is trying to talk about features and benefits of a product versus, and trying to avoid talking about price, which is once you start discounting a product, it's really hard to ever get full pricing on that item. How do you help salespeople avoid talking about price in a discussion?
That is such a great question. Again, you have control over the process. When you're on this 7-step process, we don't get into the cost, the budget. First of all, we do make sure there is budget allotted within the people you're talking to, but that doesn't happen right away. We have to set up some other goals first. The first few have to do with bonding and rapport, the upfront contract, and the pain. Then we start talking numbers. But again, once you reveal your price, you have what we call spilling your candy in the lobby, like I mentioned earlier. You lose leverage. People will come to you and take all your lovely information and they'll go shop it around. So that's the last thing you ever want to do. And the price will never come up until they see, after the whole process that you've run them through, the process of how valuable it is. And you will work through that with them, showing them what their losses are and how they can offset it with whatever it is you're doing and how that's going to make a difference. And by the end, if you've done it right, they should be saying, well, okay, let's go. And when they say that, then you discuss price. You work that out together. Sure.
Now, you've in your process talked about how to work with different personalities of possible prospects.
Yes.
And how that can affect how you have to react to different personalities. I know when I worked at for major banks, we did have a tendency to say, to kind of dissect the product and see if it met all of the key concerns that we might have, and if it did, it was probably okay. But tell us a little bit about how you deal with different personalities.
Okay, so that's another piece of what we teach, and that comes into the being able. You might think, well, how am I going to ask questions? I'm talking to a type A personality and they're just, shooting things at me. That's what we teach people to do. We want them to listen and sense who they're dealing with. Try to find that very quickly. Try to train oneself to be attuned to the type of person you're talking to. And what we do is called matching and mirroring. So if you're talking to a very tough business person and they're no nonsense and they don't want to do frivolous things, step it up, give them very clean answers to their questions, ask them some very direct questions. If you're talking to an introvert who is not a great communicator and speaks quietly and softly, lower your tone, slow down your pace, get into their world. I've done this numerous times, and it's amazing what happens. They feel comfortable with you. They feel understood. You don't want a natural disconnect. There is a fellow in one of our classes now who has a tendency to speak like this all the time. And we're trying to get him to just calm down, listen, slow it down. Personality types, that's number one. The other part is how somebody's treating you behaviorally. If they are angry, you have angry customers. We had an IT gentleman tell us, well, sometime by the time they call us, they're angry about their service. That's called critical adult, critical parent. If I'm getting somebody who's using their critical parent on me, what do? I don't want to react like a child. I don't want to be the child. I become the nurturing parent. At that point, I put on my nurturing parent. Tell me about that. It sounds, and we call it out. It sounds like you're really upset. I can tell you that that has worked every time because, again, people feel understood. And you're not trying to bully them back to feeling, doing what you want. You're hearing them like you would with a child who's misbehaved. You become the nurturing parent. You wear your adult hat. You leave your child hat in the car.
Well, that makes sense. Being able to adapt to personalities. I think fundraisers have to do the same thing. You see a big industry now in major account fundraising, and you have to deal the same way with personalities in order to keep a conversation going. Well, Lenora May, who is the Vice President of Business Development of Sandler Training based in the Los Angeles area, tell us a little bit about what a training program might look like for a participant.
Okay, so as I said, initially we were face-to-face, and we were personally limited to people in the Los Angeles area, but now with COVID, we are teaching virtually. So we have a shorter beginner, like sort of an introductory class called Foundations. Those are on Tuesday afternoons. It's an 8-week course, and it kind of covers all of the points. And then if you want to go on from there, you go into what's called Mastery Program. And that's every week on a Wednesday morning, and goes very deep into each topic that you learned in Foundations. And we practice the behaviors. Sometimes people have what we call head trash, where they're really afraid to confront asking certain questions, and they have to get past it. So we practice it. And once you practice something, I mean, how do you think the Olympic swimmers get so good? They practice, practice, practice. So once you practice, it becomes your behavior, and we make it your own. Now it's yours. You do it your way, but you practice. And that's where my acting comes in. I work with people in role playing. So I'll play a prospect, and I'll give them all kinds of varieties, and they will have to deal with me. So those are the two classes. We also do on-site training. So let's say there's a company and they've got a big sales team. We can do either bi-monthly or once a month training. It used to be right on the site. Not sure how that would work now, but I'm sure that we can do something virtually. And Mike also does private coaching in Sandler if people would rather be alone and not in a classroom.
And maybe you could just mention his background, who runs your office out there in Los Angeles.
Right. He was he came up with a business course at Loyola University that he was in charge of for 8 years. And so he's very much in that world already. And then he decided he had certain things that he felt he hit a certain wall there. And he took a year off, traveled the world, came back, and decided that he wanted to have a franchise of his own and teach Sandler. So that's his background. And he's what I like about Mike is he's very even-keeled, calm, and knows what he's talking about.
Sure. Now, Lenora, is the best place for someone who wants more information to go to your website?
Sure. Are you going to be listing that, or should I?
We'll put that down.
Okay,
what
great.
is that? Is it SandlerTraining.com?
Well, Sandler Training is you'll just get the main Sandler website. But if you look up Mike's name, Mike Casleone in Culver City, Sandler, then that would be the one.
Okay.
Or you can even send me an email at Lenora, Lenora, Lenora May, M-A-Y, 999 at gmail.com. And I'll be happy to talk to you a little bit about what you need, or if it makes sense for you. Yeah. And I just want to mention one thing about during this period of COVID. Been doing a lot of networking where we're looking at a screen of faces. And just the other day, everybody was doing their pitch. Well, some people went on so long, and if you looked, and they were doing goods and services, goods and services. And if you look at everyone's face on the screen, you can literally see if you have their interest or not. And you know, you really didn't. And there was only one guy who did a little bit of a Sandler thing using a pain point, and everybody was listening to him. So I tried to point that out to the group and said, you know, if you want help with that, give me a call.
That's great. Well, Lenora May, do you have a final thought for us today on your program? It's Sandler Training.
I just think it's a great program because nobody likes doing cold calls. Nobody likes doing the selling part of their job, whether it's face-to-face or high-pressure meetings. This really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. If you follow this, it's a really calm place to be in that space. It's a calm, and it's a tracking. You can follow it. You can see how it really works. And yeah, and I hope that you know, if you're in that world and you're frustrated and you need a little help, that you'd reach out. Okay,
well, we will stay in touch and look forward to looking through your website. I'm sure some of our viewers will as well. And Lenora May, Vice President Business Development at Sandler Training, based in the Los Angeles area. Great to talk with you today. And I'll just mention we met through our friend Jeffrey Hazlitt and the C-Suite Network. Great program for networking by itself. And we just really enjoy the chance to talk with you today.
Thank you so much, Ken. It was a pleasure.
Our pleasure. Good to talk with you. And this is Ken Kraetzer for CBSIServices, Talking Business, representing our company based in Harrison, New York, providing insurance-based benefit programs to the consumer and business banking industry and customer service management. We've got a great team of program managers, customer service managers, been working real hard, taking care of our clients and their customers during this COVID-19 unprecedented situation. I always want to give a shout out to them. And again, so for CBSIServices and our Talking Business show, this is Ken Kraetzer. Have a great day, everybody.